G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. I thought I'd do a short and sharp trade update today just to cover off little bits of information we've got today and another resurfacing of a somewhat interesting deal that the West Coast Eagles could get done. So first of all, we got a slight update on Tom Barrass. This is a tweet from John Ralph who says, the Hawks are hopeful their offer of a future first and future second for Barrass gets it done. Well, we already knew that. But West Coast wants 2 firsts. That's the first public clarification we've had that West Coast are asking for 2 first-round draft picks. And obviously, I love that. I love that that's at least our starting point, even if we negotiate down from there. But yeah, it kind of flies in the face a little bit of what Clark suggested during his press conference a week or so ago. That was when I did a video unpacking that. And I did say his reaction was ambiguous. So when he was asked, are you going to go for 2 first-round picks? He sort of said, do you think he's worth 2 first-round picks? It was unclear what he really meant by that. So I don't know if the situation has changed, whether he always was asking for 2 first-round picks, or if that situation has changed now that 14 is not part of the deal. In theory, are we waiting a future first-round pick is less valuable than a pick in this year's draft? That's entirely possible. But there we go. That's what West Coast is asking for. And naturally, I'm holding out for that. Interestingly, I saw Will Schofield's video today on Backchat where he suggested that pick 14 was never offered for Tom Barrass. I have no idea what to make of that. It does fly in the face entirely of what everyone in the media was saying previously. Regardless, it doesn't matter now. 14 is not going to be part of this deal. So yeah, fingers crossed on 2 first-round draft picks. I am sort of bracing for the possibility it's a future first and a future second, which would still be better technically, only slightly just than anything we've been offered just yet. As for Liam Baker, again, the only real update here is that from Cal Toomey on Trade Radio, he says things are progressing on a deal for Baker at the Eagles. So I'm not too sure what that's going to look like, what that progress means. Yesterday, I did a video, which is still relevant, by the way, where I preview week 2 for the West Coast Eagles. I'll leave a link to that in the top right corner of this video. But I went through my own little best case scenario situation where I trade with St Kilda and GWS first to get picks to land Baker. So short of us doing that, which there hasn't been any news about today, it's interesting that things are progressing. I don't know what he means by that, but either way, he kind of reaffirmed that Baker is still destined to land at West Coast. So I can't help but notice, like on both the comments and Twitter and all these places, a vocal minority of Hawks fans and Tigers fans really wanting me to know that West Coast have dropped the ball on this deal and he's going to Fremantle and that Richmond hold all the power, they can send him to Fremantle. I don't think that was ever going to be the case. So I think Baker ends up at West Coast. The only real update there is that, well, we've been told this before, but he says, Toomey says, I think we'll see some progress on that over the next 24 hours. Yeah, I'm not believing that. It could easily go down to the deadline, but hopefully we've got some deals to talk about tomorrow. The deal I want to talk about here is Matt Owies. This is an interesting one. So I did a video on this a while ago where Matt Owies was not offered a contract to stay at Carlton, which I thought was curious. It made sense to me at the time that this was a move to make room for Houston. I no longer believe that to be the case because Carlton aren't serious about Houston at the moment. It seems to be just the wrong place at the wrong time or out of contract at the wrong time for Matthew Owies. And Owies just kicked 33 goals for Carlton and he is 27. He will turn 28 by around 1 of next year. I think March is his birthday. But yeah, 3rd in their leading goal kicker, which is interesting. So putting aside the fact that I think Carlton probably haven't done a great job of dealing with this situation. I think if they'd handled this differently, Owies could probably have been traded for something, at least in the top 40. I mean, the longer this goes on and the longer Carlton don't try and either keep Owies or negotiate it with a club for a trade, the less value he's going to have. So where it currently sits is I think Matthew Owies is going to walk out of Carlton. It's been reported by Sam Edmund that he's not going back. The ship has sailed. And it reads as though it's going to be as a delisted free agent to a new club. And Gold Coast and West Coast have been outlined as the 2 clubs most likely at this stage. It's hard to tell with delisted free agents because in theory we're not negotiating with Carlton for anything. So I don't know how strong that mail is, but we do know from a few weeks back that Owies did meet with West Coast, or at least it was reported, and he met with several other non-Victorian clubs. Tom Morris also said today that he thinks it's more likely West Coast than Gold Coast. Again, not too sure what that's based on. He wasn't super confident when he said that, but perhaps it's just a reflection that West Coast might be the most interested. So this is an interesting decision for us to make. Do we proceed and try and sign Matt Owies, bearing in mind it's almost certainly going to be as a delisted free agent, I would have thought. Like I said, I think he's way too good to be signed as a delisted free agent. I think Carlton might have dropped the ball there a little bit. But this is about us. Should we have an interest in Matthew Owies as a delisted free agent? Well, considering the cost, I mean, there's not too much downside here, but there is still an opportunity cost. So we can progress with the Barrass deals and Baker and prioritize the draft. And then as a delisted free agent, we have longer to sign him up later. So we can wait to see what outcome we get in terms of draft picks and how many list spots we have before deciding on getting Matthew Owies. So we do need to bear that in mind. This is not a decision West Coast necessarily has to make right now, although they might need to put the legwork in to chat with Owies at least. So what are the downsides of getting a Matthew Owies? It's a list spot, and that really means it would be instead of our last pick in the draft, which at this current point in time could be in the 60s. Again, I'm hoping we strengthen our draft position, take 5 decent picks. So if it's Matthew Owies or say pick 63 or whatever it is, then you'd think the potential value of signing Owies would be better. On the other hand, we may not have a room for a 5th spot. So is it potentially a decision between Matthew Owies and keeping Alex Withan? I kind of think Owies is a better player than Withan. But then I go to, what does our list actually require? And I would say that we're probably more in need of a medium-sized defender who may play waffle every week, but is still on the list, more so than we need a small forward in Matthew Owies. So we've, obviously done this strategy this year of obviously trying to maximize our draft hand, I would hope, and get in some established players that can help the transition. So Baker's 27 by round 1 next year. Graham will be 26, turning 27, I think. Owies will be 28 by round 1. So from that point of view, Owies does technically fit that criteria of transition player. But the need for a third one is diminished when you've already got Graham and Baker. And that's assuming we get Baker, but at this point, I think it's a fairly safe assumption. So do we need 3 of those sort of mature players to help the transition? Probably not massively. Would he be best 22? I'm inclined to say yes. I think if he's best 22 at Carlton, he's going to be best 22 at West Coast. But then I go back to the fact that we've got a few youngsters, small forwards there that we probably want to give some games to. I mean, Tyrell Dewar comes to mind. Does Owies come in and suppress Tyrell Dewar, who I want to see in round 1 of next season? It's a very real possibility. Then you also consider getting Graham, Baker, and Owies, right? All 3 of those are going to play at least partially forward of centre. Now, I think that my guess is Graham is probably going to spend more time in the midfield for West Coast than he did at Richmond. I think that's possibly where he wants to play, and that's probably his value to us as a big-bodied, contested style midfielder, as opposed to an opportunistic forward, where he can be crafty around goals, but he's not a big goal kicker. So Graham's probably a midfielder forward. It's unclear where Baker fits, because he's played every position on the ground, and I kind of like the idea of him running off half back, even though his ball use isn't amazing. He gives us some zip and drive out of the back half, and like Graham, he may not be bad around goals, but he doesn't kick a lot of goals, and will still play a fair amount of midfield. And then there's always on top of that, who probably is a more traditional small forward in the goal kicking sense. That was a weird way to phrase it, but he actually is there to kick goals as opposed to being a pressure forward or something like that. So while he's different, all 3 of those players might contribute to a bit of a logjam in our front half, which is not short of established players. So how do I sum that up? What do I really think here? I think on value, it's a choice between Owies and the last pick of the draft, and he improves our best 22, you should always make these sort of moneyball decisions to try and improve the best 22. On the other hand, the need is not that strong here. So I'm probably a little bit ambivalent about it, but I'm curious to see why West Coast has a genuine interest in Matt Owies. And I'm also curious why some other clubs don't. When you've got someone like a North Melbourne who need a small forward who actually hits the scoreboard, I thought it would make more sense for them than it does for us, but nonetheless, we seem to be linked. So I guess let me know in the comments what you think about potentially getting Matt Owies. Like, he would be best 22, but that is probably one where I'm concerned he would probably just be suppressing the opportunities of other players in our team. Like I said, Tyrell Dewar was the one that came to mind, but I suppose there's Tyler Brockman. Depending on your views on Tyler Brockman, do you want to see him given some opportunity? He probably needs to play at AFL level to develop. I mean, there's also Noah Long, who we got to get back into this team. Who knows what sort of player Hutchinson's going to be next year? Do they see him more as a midfielder? But I'd imagine he still plays a little bit in the forward line. Maybe he goes back. Then there's the Malachi Champion, who we're probably going to get as an academy player this draft. I mean, he's probably not one I'd expect to see, round 1 next year. So maybe that one's less important. But broadly speaking, it's not a position on the ground where we're really lacking options, as opposed to Baker and Graham as genuine midfield options. I can see the utility of those players for us a little bit more. But let me know in the comments what you think. It's a little interesting twist to the tail here. I'd still probably want to maximize our draft hand as a priority. And if we get 5 top 30 picks, like I ambitiously said in the other video, then that's obviously a scenario where we don't have room for Owies. But this one might play out over a little period of time. Let me know what you think, Eagles fans. I'll see you the next one. Cheers.